Okay, time to talk about some real artifacts. Now, in the previous videos, in the previous video, the no talk video where I reconstruct a hafted point, I reverse engineered it, came up with this, right? Well, I'm going to do a director's cut of that video, but in the meantime, I'm going to do this artifact video showing you real artifacts I got from my friend Randy from Mississippi. Okay, so this is a real artifact, the one I was using in the video. It's from Mississippi, and all the artifacts that I'm going to show here in the next few minutes or so are all from Mississippi. Now, I could go and measure each one of these for the width to thickness ratio, but I'm not going to measure each one, and I didn't do an average. But this one here is a 3-to-1. Let's see, 35 millimeter by 10 millimeter. Right? 3 times wider than thickness, 3-to-1. There are some in here that are 2-to-1, and there's, I think the thinnest one here is not very good either. Let's say this is 38 by 8. What do I say? 7 millimeters by 38. That's 5-to-1. This is the thinnest one I have. It's not like the other ones either. Most of the other ones are like this. I'll show you. This one is even fatter than the one I was using in the video, but the proportions are about the same. Now, do I think these are knives or little dart points or what? In this case, I think they're at little dart points. They seem to be broken in similar ways. This does look like broken in manufacture, but these snaps can also be impact fractures. Okay. Now, you might ask, are some of these heat treated? Because Mississippi has many good stones, good material. You don't need to nap it raw, right? It's good heat treatable material, I should say. You can nap it raw, but it heat treats very well, especially the citronelle type gravels, those type of gravels. You would expect it to be this thick with raw, very difficult to work stone. But I think many of these were actually heat treated. But why, with such excellent material, would they come up with such crude points? They could obviously make thin points. That's probably from a different culture, right? Maybe a different time period. Probably different time period. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't take all that long to start making thin points. So there had to be some reason why they remain thick and not very sharp. To speculate, why is difficult, because there's many exceptions. There are all kinds of different ways to use these things. You can use them as knives, as drills, as saws, as projectile points. You can even put them into a club, a wooden club, and use them as spikes in wooden clubs. But I think most of these were hafted like this. If they have a stem of this shape, expanding stem, probably hafted like this. If they're contracting slightly or straight and or narrow and thick, this is probably hafted into a bone, the cavity of a bone, and used as a knife. All right, so I mean, these could be used as knives too. You know, comparing the size, if this is a knife, then why can't that be a knife? It might have been a knife. And then why can't the one I reproduced be a knife as well? Yeah, it can be a knife as well. But what I tend to do these days is look at the hafting strategy. It's easy to haft this into the bone cavity, you know, a long bone, a leg bone. You just put it in there with some glue. You don't need to do very much. Just cut the bone right where you want to haft it. Put it into the cavity with glue, and that's it. The edges are thin on this. You can see how they scooped it out to create that hollow ground effect. But on these, they don't have that effect. They're just crudely sharpened. So that gives me another reason to believe this was a knife form, okay? But it could be a projectile point. It's just hard to haft this stuff because it's weak. It's not difficult, it's just weak. It's hard, I should say, it's hard to justify hafting it in a weak way. And it's hard to get it to be strong unless it has a strong stem. This is not a very strong stem, especially for impacts. Not when you compare it to something like this. This is a very strong stem. It'll hold up to impact. So instead of snapping across the neck, it snaps midway if there's a lot of stress on it. And that allows you to resharpen later if it's long enough. This can be resharpened and reused, in my opinion. I don't see why not. Or you can resharpen it to be used as a scraper. So it's advantageous to have it thick across the neck, so it'll snap higher. You might be able to reuse it much more easily. So anyway, where I was going with the material, some of this material is excellent, especially when heat treated. How do I know? Well, I also got rock from my friend Randy, and I heat treated it. And it heat treats very nicely. And there's some artifacts in here that look like they're made of this material. This is mine. This is a recent nodule that I heat treated, and this is a real artifact here on the right. This one looks like it could have been broken in manufacture, or it could have been hafted and snapped. It's just, you know, a point without notches. It can still be used like that. You can haft it like that. You don't have to have notches in it. You can, you know, if you remove the barbs from this thing, it'll look like this, except for the stem, but you haft it in the same way. All right. So I'm just going to go through a lot of these artifacts and show you what the real ones look like, so you know. Now a lot of you already know that, and you say, yeah, we all know they're thick and clunky, but we don't want to see the thick and clunky. We want to see the thin and beautiful. Yeah, I know, but if you want to do it like they used to do it, like everybody says they want, you have to look at how they used to do it. If there are nappers on the internet that are not showing you how to make them like this, they're not showing you how they used to do it. Okay? If you don't care, then I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the people who say they care about how they used to be done. Okay? Alright, so here we go. Let's see. I am going to measure some of these. I'm curious. This is like 20 millimeter by 10 or 9. That's like 2 to 1. Now, could this be a drill? Could this have been a lot wider with a narrow stem? and they just trimmed it down to be drill-like, and it's not a projectile point. Yeah, it's possible. It does look like an impact fracture, though. It looks like it was hafted. Probably in something thinner than this piece. Well, what I did with this particular piece of wood, this is live oak, just in case you want to know. Live oak is one of the most dense and hard woods that I could get. Let's see. And stone does... it does work on this hard, dense wood. Anyway, I go by the proportions of the artifact when I try to create or reverse engineer what it might have looked like. And this particular piece looks like it would on a thick piece of wood, because you don't want really, really thin little still don't know what these are called, this fork arrangement. I don't know what these aren't tines, right? But they're called something. I just don't know what they're called. But you don't want these things to be too thin, so you need a thick piece of wood. But you can always trim it down this way on this side to fit into the socket of your main shaft or spear shaft. But the top has to be thick and wide enough for you to have substantial things. Substantial sides to the notch. And I'd say 1/8 of an inch would be a good round number for at little dart points. Arrows, of course, can be thinner. That's an 1/8. Let's see. Right there. You don't want it much thinner than an 1/8. It's actually thicker. I could probably take it down a little bit more and still be strong. But if you use a weaker wood, it's going to have to be thicker. These little things are going to have to be thicker. With weaker wood, you can get them thinned down with strong wood, like I'm using. I can go pretty thin, comparatively speaking. All right, so I'm going to go through these again. I'm going to get back to these again. Some of these are kind of wonky. And if you're not making mistakes like this, or this looks like mistakes, it might not be. It just might be a quick way of doing it. If you're not doing it like this, you're not doing it like they used to do it. All right? All right. Yeah. I've seen people do the equivalent of sticking their fingers in their ears and going la 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 when they hear that this is the way they used to do it. And this is how they looked. They go, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know about it. I just want to see the beautiful stuff. Well, you do find beautiful points in collections like this when you're looking for points. But I think the vast majority are kind of clunky by comparison. This one's not too bad, right? As far as thickness goes, this has a substantial room in this socket here, comparatively speaking. And it looks like it's sharpened. And they didn't care about the edge being all wonky. It doesn't look like they cared that it was uneven. They sharpened it anyway. See, it's intentional sharpening on edges that are all kind of wonky. So they did do it that way. Now if you have to make 100 of these in a short period of time, because that's what you do, even someone who's very skilled will end up making wonky points like this because he's got to make 100 of them. You don't want to be taking forever on each one. So it doesn't mean that this was made by unskilled people. This could be made by a very skilled person. He just needed to make a ton of them. Also, if there's very few nappers in the tribe, they need to make more proportionally than if everybody's a napper. All right, I got to pause here. I got a phone call. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. This one here doesn't seem to be made out of the Mississippi gravel. It's some kind of weird stuff. It's more like a chalky type chert. It's not like this. This appears to be heat treated, and yeah, I forget to mention which ones I think are heat treated. This one seems to be heat treated as well. This one looks like it's probably raw. It's hard to tell. This one might be heat treated here. This one. But with these Mississippi gravels, they have a range, so they get affected by heat at different temperatures, and the higher you go, the more glossy they get. But they're still easier to nap if they are heated even to lower temperatures. But I think I heated this one to 400, this Mississippi gravel, and it flakes very, very easily. I could probably tone that down to 375 or something like that and still get a good nappability. I'll try to guess which ones are heat treated. Most of these look like the same kind of consistency. They're either high grade chert or heat treats. They do look like they're high grade cherts for the most part. This one appears to be heat treated, but even so, it's very thick. But the edges are sharpened, and they are sharp, even when it's that thick. Now, I think this is that little dart point, probably from a different culture, or maybe they hunt different types of game. And we're not even discussing if they hunted alligators or fish, large fish with these things. Right? I think alligators existed in Mississippi during these times, during the Archaic, up and down the Mississippi River, pretty far inland. They could also be hunting other aquatic animals. I don't know. I'm not up on my megafauna, but I think there might have been larger animals living in or near the water. Giant beavers, maybe. I don't know. This probably doesn't go back far enough. I think the megafauna were extinct by the time these points were made. But they could have been hunting very large fish with these, at least, right? It would make sense. You don't want to spend too much time on these if you're hunting large fish, because the chances of losing these is very high if you're fishing with them. So you can't even retrieve them to resharpen them. Now this is broken in two spots, the stem and the blade. So that's some pretty heavy duty impact. That looks like impact breakage to me when it's a stem here and the blade. That's pretty rugged treatment. Very, very rough treatment. And so they were hunting something or doing something with these, or putting a lot of stress on the points. And a lot of direct percussion. Very little pressure resharpening. They are doing the notches with pressure, it looks like. But they could also be doing some punch work on the notches as well. Again, the edges are not thinned down very much, but they seem to have been perfectly fine with that. They all curiously, not all, a lot of them curiously fit into the same socket pretty easily. The one I made for that first piece. They all seem to be pretty standardized as far as thickness. This one's a little bit thicker. There's a lot that are too thick for this haft, but there are a lot that actually do fit. That one fits. And it's broken where you would think it'd break off if you hit something really hard with it. You know, maybe turtle shell. I don't know, maybe they're hunting turtles with it. I don't know. Can you pierce a turtle shell with a atlatl dart? I've never tried, so I don't know. They might be shooting alligator gar with tough scales with this stuff. I don't know. That's a really thick point. And made very quickly with probably mostly direct percussion. Still a little bit of cortex there. Not very much attention paid to the details around the edges. Some of you guys know the types on these. I don't really know the types, and to tell you the truth, as I get older and as I go along further with my research, I don't really care about the types anymore. I'm finding that to type it makes it more confusing, and it takes away from the relationship between other areas. You know, if you type it as a certain point from a certain area, you're kind of restricting its technology to that area, where they may have learned from other areas, or they may be trading with other peoples in other areas and copying and borrowing from the technologies. Some definitely are isolated because there isn't anything remotely similar, but I think most of these points are related to other points nearby, and sometimes even hundreds or thousands of miles away. They're still related, but you can't tell that by the names, because they're named something different in different states. So I don't really care about the names too much anymore. I care about mainly how they're hafted and how they are made and what they are used for. You can learn something about how they were used by the damage they have on the edges and snaps like this, impact snaps and stuff. You can learn by how to haft these. You know, these all seem to be hafted in the same kind of diameter wood shafts. You know what I mean? This, you know, that's perfect width for hafting this one. So the hafts were kind of similar, the foreshafts, and they're similar everywhere. I've got notes on foreshafts from the middle of the country, from the east, from the southwest especially, and also, you know, a few from other areas, and they all seem to be very similar as far as diameter on the foreshafts. Very similar. Let's see. I could start grouping these into similar base forms. But I'm not going to. I'm not going to speculate as to what they are. I just want to look at how they were made. You know, maybe look at, does it look heat treated? This one looks heat treated to me. It also looks like the same type of material, except a more yellowish. Maybe it's patina, I don't know, but it looks about the same as this other stuff here, as far as consistency and ease of knapping. These gravels range in color too, so they're not always that pinkish, whitish stuff. And it's interesting to see that sometimes they left the cortex on these. Some of these definitely feel dry and raw and not heat treated. Some of these could be very old and some fairly recent. So some could be transitional archaic, which is later on, and some could be transitional paleo. It's hard to tell. This looks like a heat treated piece, or very high quality. It might even be some of that, some stuff that looks like the Fort Payne shirt, or not Fort Payne, but the stuff I was just knapping. I just made an arrowhead out of it, similar to Hornstone. I can't remember the name now. It looks like it's stuff similar to that, or heat treat that is similar to that. Yeah, this does look like a heat treat. When it's heat treated, you can shape it quickly and easily with hammerstone or antler billet. And this looks like it was almost completely shaped with direct percussion without any pressure. And I think this was an atlatl dart point. It just snapped. Could have been snapped during construction. It might have been something like, you know, it's probably the same type as this one. This one is complete and that one is not. There's still some cortex on it. But you never know, they could have used it if they're shooting something that doesn't have a very thick hide like fish. You know, you don't need a really sharp edge to penetrate something with a thin skin. So yeah, this looks like it's a heat treat. I have some of this stuff. Heat treated. Looks just like it. Now, is it the same as the other one I just had? What did I do with it? It could be the same stuff. If it is, it's a very, very high quality chert. But as you can see, they didn't care. They didn't take advantage of its beautiful knapping characteristics to make beautiful points out of it. They just made fast, crude points. Now this, to be fair, this could be broken in manufacture and not finished, because this looks like a manufacturing break with an internal flaw that caused that to happen. But it could happen after the fact, after it's already been hafted, because this edge does feel sharp enough to be useful as a projectile point. So if they were heating this stuff, they weren't using the heat to make beautiful points. They were just using it to facilitate knapping with a hammerstone or something, make it easier to knap with only a hammerstone or only an antler billet. Now this edge is a little more refined. This looks like a heat treat also. It could be a preform. Because I don't see what could have done this damage as an impact. I don't know. It doesn't look like impact damage. It looks like knapping damage, like it was in the process of being made and it snapped. The stem snapped off. Looks like broken in manufacture to me. Even with that refined edge, it still looks like it's broken in manufacture. But most of these look like they're broken on impact. There's a lot of these that are just broken right above the haft. Now, why didn't my friend send me some whole ones to look at? Why did he send me the clunkies with the tips broken off? I bet you he's got like twice as many good ones, and these are just the few bad ones. No, I think the majority are like this, with very few that are very well made. This one even has a curve in it. Although I don't think this one was finished. It's got a crystal pocket in it. It's probably a preform, although it can still be used. You know, if you don't have access to lots of flakes and you're out in the field and you have one of these in your kit, like just to fail the temp, you just keep it. You can, you know, do some cutting stuff with it maybe. I don't know. I haven't lived with stone out in the wild, I guess, for any length of time, so I don't really know what can be done with these pieces of stone. Everyone says, yeah, they worked hides with these or scraped bone, but there could be other ways to use these things. They could be dispatching animals within traps. You know, they could be using it to repeatedly stab an animal within a trap. And they're hafted to the end of a spear. An actual handheld spear, and they're killing things that are trapped with these things. I don't know. They could be war club points. You know, you put it into a war club, like I said a little bit earlier. Although this particular one, I don't think so, because it has those little ears on the stem. That indicates to me that it was hafted similar to this. And they stick out so the hafting doesn't come off. You know, it's a little bit more secure. So I'm getting toward the end of the artifacts. There are some in here that look like they might be scrapers or adze blades. They have that little chisel end to them. Some of you guys know what these are. I don't really study these type of tools. You know, I don't study this type of tool very much. This looks like it could be a scraper, what they call a thumb scraper, to remove membranes from hides, or to remove flesh from bones, or to shave down raw hide into thinner raw hide. You shave down thin, or you shave down thick areas on rawhide to make it thin like the other areas, to have a consistent rawhide. This probably is good for that, to thin down rawhide. I don't know. You can haft it similar to an adze blade, but what you're doing is you're scraping a hide with it. Or you could be using it to stretch the hide. You know, when you're doing brain tan, as the hide dries, you need something to stretch it and to work it. They might be using that. I don't know. I don't know if that's smooth enough, or if there's use where that would say, yeah, that's been used against hide. Right now it feels a little jaggedy and sharp, so it wasn't used much. If it was used in that way, I don't feel like it's polished or anything. This looks like a heat treat to me. Broken in manufacture. Looks like a bunch of defects. Anyway, there's a bunch. He sent me a bunch of tools. Obviously worked. These could be preforms for little dart points, and these little chisel ends could be coincidence and not used as a tool. These could just be spalled out and preformed out and then broken in manufacture. This one probably is a scraper, because it feels like it's been polished a little bit. There's no real sharp edges on it. Even that step fracture feels worn down, although it could be tumbled in the river or something, but this feels like it was used to scrape something. And who knows? You know, the hide working tools do need a hard bit, you know, to work the hide, to soften it up. You can also use the sides of these things as side scrapers. It doesn't have to be the end. Like in end scrapers, you can use the sides as well. So I may be looking at some of these completely wrong, and what they were doing was using the sides and not the ends. Although it looks like they were using the end on this one. That kind of thing. Very high quality stuff. This is high quality stuff. Now this might be just small nodules and you can't really do too much with these except make these little scraping tools. But if you wanted to, you could come up with some really nice little arrowheads or nice little dart points. Nothing's stopping you really, even with something this small. You could still, there's still enough sticking out of the hafting area that you can use it as a projectile point. You just need to thin it down. And you don't even need to thin it down that much to get something like this. There might be room in there for a point. Yeah. So they could have used it, but they chose not to. They did. I guess they didn't need to. This one here, this is a high grade piece. I think it's a preform. Although, I guess this edge is kind of refined, so it could have been used as a knife or a saw or something, but or a scraper. Yeah, everyone says yeah, scraper, or yeah, saw, or yeah, it was it works hides, but you never know. Now a lot of these look like broken drills. That's why I kind of stuck them together. Although there might be a little dart point style that has this kind of a configuration where it has a very sharp, narrow point. Or this has just been reworked down to this shape and used as a projectile point, or it could be a drill. Broken. This looks like a piece of heat treat, similar to what I got here. These are kind of thin, so I don't know if they're the same point type as these clunky ones, and they're just thinned down and used as drills, or if they're a separate type of projectile point. I don't know. Some of you guys know. They're much better at this Mississippi archaeology. This one looks like it has some intentional serrations on the sides. But again, it's relatively crudely made. Compared to other pieces that everyone likes to be fascinated with. They'd like to be fascinated with the really pretty ones. So these look very crude. So I don't know. I think this is a preform. It looks pristine. Looks like nothing's wrong with it. They were just shaping it, and they didn't finish shaping it. Looks like it's probably, I don't know, one of these points. Although this looks like it's been worked down, resharpened. This could be the final shape, I don't know. And if it is, you could make one of those. Of course, the point is not long enough. Maybe that's why they ditched this one. This one I can't tell if it's a drill or a perforator. It probably is a perforator, because I would make that edge a lot better if I was drilling with it. Although if you're drilling into something soft, you don't need to have any consistent edges to it. You just need to expand the hole a little bit if you're drilling something soft. Maybe using it for basketry or something, you need to drill a hole somewhere in the basket to insert another thing. But yeah, it looks like a drill on a piece that was broken in manufacture. Alright, so that's it. I'm down to nothing. Just little pieces. Stuff that looks like it could be heat treated, and some looks like it's raw. I know that some of this works much better when it's heat treated. Like this stuff here in the raw state is difficult to knap, but heat treating is pretty nice. Heat treating leaves it pretty nice to work with. So I would say, just as a guess, at least 50% of this stuff is heat treat. and it naps very well when heat treated, but they didn't take advantage of that to make nice, beautiful thin points. Probably because they didn't need to. They just wanted to facilitate their hammerstone work or their billet work or whatever. Okay, all right. Hope you enjoyed it. That's it.